The sky above Tyrell burned in colors Earth had no words for. Crimson plasma storms licked the edge of the atmosphere. The fractured moon hung low, bleeding debris like veins torn open in orbit. All across the surface, the last cities of the Aurelian race fell one by one under Earth's orbital guns. Inside the command deck of the human dreadnought VSS Galatine, Admiral Silas Renn stood motionless, his arms behind his back. The holo display in front of him pulsed with red and blue. Targets, friendlies, debris. Target lock confirmed on Sector 9, came the cold voice of Lieutenant Harrow. Refugee transports are attempting atmospheric lift. Scanners show no weapons, no shields. Renn didn't answer at first. The rest of the Earth Federation fleet had already begun cleansing operations. Civilian evacuations were deemed potential insurgency masks. The orders were clear. No survivors, no delays. "Your call, sir," Harrow said again, this time with the slightest hesitation. "Do we fire?" Silas stared at the soft blue blip, marked TSV Diary, civilian status confirmed. It was old, slow, unarmed, and leaking plasma from a failing main drive. He exhaled slowly. "Negative," he said. "Pull firing solution. Let them go." There was a long silence on the bridge. Then Harrow turned, brows furrowed. "Admiral, command protocols." "I said let them go." Another pause. This one deeper, thicker. "Acknowledge," Harrow replied, voice tight. "Pulling solution." The rest of the fleet did not hesitate. One by one, Tyrell cities blinked out in flashes of light. But in Sector 9, a single transport ship limped through the haze, breaking atmosphere, vanishing into the black, with wounded and frightened passengers aboard. Renn said nothing, but he watched it go, not with pride, not with doubt, just the kind of stillness that comes from knowing you've already paid for a decision before you even make it. Back on Earth, the council chamber was colder than space. Renn stood alone at the tribunal dais, his uniform stripped of its stars, his nameplate removed. The faces before him were polished, political, pitiless. "You violated cleansing protocol, Admiral," sent Counselor Vera Kane. "You jeopardized operational integrity and disregarded direct orders." "I spared a refugee ship," Renn replied evenly, "unarmed, carrying wounded, children." The word children echoed in the chamber, like it didn't belong there. "An emotional choice," another voice snapped, "not a tactical one. I didn't join the fleet to be a war criminal." A murmur rippled, not applause, not agreement, just discomfort. "You are hereby removed from active command," Kane declared, "effective immediately. Your service record will note this breach, and your pension will be reconsidered." Renn didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just nodded once. "You'll forget me," he said quietly, "but they won't." He turned and left without another word. Years passed. Tyrell was erased from memory, its surface turned to glass, its name struck from maps. The Aurelian race scattered into exo-civilian registries. Most assumed they'd die out. And Silas Renn, he vanished into the civilian grid. No longer a commander, just another retired name lost in the bureaucracy of post-war peace. But somewhere, on the edge of a dying galaxy, the TSV Diary floated through space. And inside it, the children grew up. They remembered the man who disobeyed his orders, the man who let them live, the man who saw them as more than statistics. And one day, they built ships. The tribunal chamber was cold, not in temperature, but in design. Metal walls without windows, no ganners, no color, no crest, just gray, just judgment. Admiral Silas Renn stood alone beneath the council's gaze. His dress uniform was intact, but stripped of rank. No insignia, no ribbons, no stars, just empty black fabric that clung to his frame like a forgotten promise. "Admiral," began Counselor Vera Kane, her voice cutting through the silence like ice through still water. "You stand accused of violating Section 14 of Article 9, Command Integrity Under Fire. You delayed execution of an orbital cleansing directive during a live combat operation." Silas didn't flinch. "I delayed the destruction of a refugee transport," he said, calm, flat, as if stating weather conditions. "Because it wasn't a threat, and because it was right." A murmur broke across the chamber. No one clapped, no one shouted, but they were listening now. For just a moment, the frost cracked. Counselor Kane's eyes didn't waver. "Right and wrong, Admiral, are not your jurisdiction. Orders are. Protocols are." They were unarmed, carrying wounded, mostly children. "We were ordered to erase them." She let the silence sit this time. "And you ignored that order?" Silas nodded. "Yes. Do you understand what that means?" He looked directly at her. Not defiant, not angry, just sure. "It means that someone, somewhere lived." The verdict was never in question. Silas was stripped of his admiralty, not dishonorably discharged. No, the council didn't want a martyr. He was simply reassigned, buried under bureaucratic fog, pushed into logistics, a name in a file, a voice never called on again. No fleet farewell, no flag lowered, just a transport back to Earth with no escort, and a datapad marked Final Review. He stepped off the shuttle and into a sky that looked too bright. Civilians passed without recognition. No salutes, no eye contact, just another man walking with purpose and carrying none. Years passed. He took work in colonial transport regulation, a glorified freight manager. His name never made the briefings. No one ever asked him about Tyrell. No one ever mentioned the Dayari transport. But in quiet moments, over black coffee, over cracked boots and dusty offices, he remembered the little blue light on the scanner, the unarmed ship, the way it drifted through atmosphere like it barely had the will to fly. He remembered the look on Harrow's face when he gave the order, and the way no one ever spoke of it again. One evening, after a rainstorm, a courier dropped a sealed packet outside his apartment door. No return address, no signature. Inside, a photograph. A child, maybe 9, gold-eyed, silver-skinned, smiling in front of a makeshift flag, and a line written in angular alien script, translated beneath, "For the one who saws his people." That night, Silas turned off his terminal and sat in silence. Not in guilt, not in regret, but in memory. Elsewhere, beyond the border of human space, the Aurelians rebuilt. Slowly, quietly. They didn't broadcast. They didn't form alliances. They disappeared into the silent corners of forgotten systems and lit fires where the Federation no longer looked. They raised their children with 2 names, their own and his. From he showed them mercy. They returned with fire. The rain came less often now. Earth's climate grids were overcorrecting again. Another quiet bureaucratic failure no one would fix. Silas Renn didn't mind the dry seasons. His bones ached less in the heat. He kept his routine. Long mornings with silence, afternoon work at a forgotten logistics desk 3 stories below Federation HQ, and evenings spent reading outdated fleet journals that never mentioned his name. Occasionally, someone would glance at him in the corridors, an officer, a cadet, but their eyes never stayed. Perhaps they recognized him from archived footage. Perhaps not. It didn't matter. That man was gone. Admiral Silas Renn had died on Tyrell. The man who remained was a ghost still wearing his skin. In quiet moments, he heard the voices again. Target lock confirmed. Refugee transports are attempting atmospheric lift. He saw the light on the scanner again. The blinking blue dot. The Mercy. He never doubted the choice, but he did wonder what came of it. He didn't know that across the galaxy, under the veil of uncharted space, that choice had become doctrine. In the Aurelian outer colonies, silence was the first commandment. They remembered how the Federation had found them, how Earth had come in fire and left them in ash. And they remembered the one man who didn't. His name was not spoken as a title. It was spoken as a promise, to see them as he did. On Ashatal, the newly constructed Aurelian ringworld, a young warmind was brought online. Its first input code was a human name, Renn. The engineers didn't explain the significance to outsiders. They didn't need to. Across scattered Aurelian systems, the children of survivors became architects, tacticians, strategists. They didn't build temples. They built ships. Their hulls bore no colors, no broadcast beacons, no political affiliations, just silence and teeth. Back on Earth, Silas received a quiet promotion, unrequested. He was moved to interstellar logistics analysis, buried under thick encryption. He now had access to system data from every colonial freight hub. It was a consolation post disguised as relevance. But he noticed something. Small anomalies. Cargo loads vanishing from fringe stations. Unmapped drive signatures passing through dead lanes. Long-range sensors detecting gravitational warps just before power failures. Ghost fleets, he wrote in a private report. Unknown patterns. Non-hostile. Purpose unclear. No one read it. No one responded. The system buried anomalies the way it buried people. At night, he stared at the sky. He didn't expect thanks. He didn't want redemption. But something inside him whispered. Not guilt, not hope, just this. They lived. And somewhere out there, he knew, they remembered. The warning came without sound. No flare, no signal, just black dots on a long-range scan. Ships where there should have been none. Earth's Defense Command stared at the report in silence. That's not one fleet, said Colonel Weiss, eyes scanning the overlapping vectors. That's 6. Coordinated, multiple species. He paused. They're coming for us. No one argued. The Yitav Coalition, the Krasari Pact, and the Urgan Sway, all former diplomatic partners, had fractured contact over the last decade. Now, it was clear. They'd formed something new, something focused. They want Earth neutralized, said Admiral Chen, fingers laced tightly. Not invaded, not occupied, just erased. Across the inner systems, panic didn't spread. It coagulated. Frozen, bureaucratic, paralyzed. The Council demanded negotiation. The outer colonies screamed for reinforcements. The fleets waited. Protocol Arcanus, Earth's oldest and most dangerous contingency, remained locked. Too final, too quiet, too forgotten. Silas Renn read the reports from his modest desk on level 7B. He didn't speak, he didn't rise, but his breath slowed. He recognized the pattern. Simultaneous border breaches. No broadcast, no claimed cause, just movement. He walked out of the building that night without logging off. At the gate, the young officer on duty looked up, surprised. "Sir, you're not cleared." Silas met his eyes, quiet and calm. "I wrote the protocols you're about to invoke. At midnight, the orbital grid above Mars dimmed. 8 defense satellites shut down, not from enemy fire, but from untraceable infiltration pulses, code buried in their firmware by old allies turned hostile. By dawn, New Jakarta, Earth's core military headquarters, had lost contact with 2 sectors and an entire deep-range monitoring array. Admiral Marcus V, 71 and sharp as a blade, stood in the situation chamber with blood in his eyes. "We underestimated them," he said. "They've had decades to plan this." A junior analyst cleared his throat. "Sir, we still have our main fleet and our deterrent assets." Marcus didn't look at him. "We don't need a fleet," he said. "We need a response." He turned to his aide. "Where is Silas Renn?" That same night, Earth's orbital night sky glitched. A patch of stars blinked out, not naturally. They were occluded by something massive. Sensors scrambled. Cameras failed. Then the grid went still, just for a second. Then came a ping, a single transmission on an encrypted channel, not used since the Tyrell campaign. Silas Renn opened the message. No words, no origin, just an icon. A silver crescent. He recognized it immediately. "Dayari," he whispered. He didn't smile, he didn't flinch. But in his chest, something old, something buried, rose. Back at Earth Command, Admiral Marcus V opened the door to the lower vault manually. Inside, a cold, narrow chamber. 1 chair, 1 man, 1 terminal. Silas sat, hands folded, eyes fixed on a blinking dot on the map. A dot moving toward Sol. "They're coming," Marcus said. "Yes," Silas replied quietly. "The enemy?" Silas looked up. "No, them." Marcus stared, then nodded once. "Get ready." In the distance, past failed borders and dead systems, the sky cracked. Not from fire, but from a fleet emerging from silent space. No registration, no heat, no signature, but every ship bore a name etched into their hulls. Renn. In the heart of Earth's Defense Command, 1,000 lights blinked across a dozen war tables. Enemy fleets had begun staging across 6 sectors. The inner colonies were collapsing inward like frightened birds. But in all that chaos, no one noticed the silent relay that had activated. A signal went out. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an SOS. It was something older. A Black Seal directive encoded with command-level access dating back 40 years. Contingency call Tyrell Echo. Authorization Renn. No one on the active council remembered what that meant. But Silas did. Somewhere between systems in deep unclaimed space, a cluster of silent satellites stirred. They were relics, obsolete, power-starved. But they did one thing perfectly. They listened, and when the signal came, they didn't broadcast it. They reflected it, one to the next, through skip-jump pulses buried in comet tails and asteroid cores. Within minutes, the message reached its true destination, a sector marked dead on every Federation map. Coordinates, Aurelian Fringe. On the Aurelian ring world Ashatal, the warmind flickered to life. Its inner chamber glowed violet as command routines shifted. Tyrell Echo received, it said. In the war room, First Strategist Mara III stood without speaking. Her silver eyes glinted as she looked to the old banner in the corner, a Federation admiral's coat folded into a glass frame. "He calls," she said quietly. The room remained still. "Then we answer," came the chorus reply. Back on Earth, the inner council began to fracture. The Chancellor wanted diplomacy. The generals wanted first strikes. The colonies wanted independence. "We're not ready for this kind of war," one ambassador said, sweating. "No," replied Admiral Marcus V, his tone like cold iron. "We're not." "Then who is?" The answer arrived 7 hours later. Without transmission, without flare, without escort, a fleet blinked into Sol's outer gravity well. 32 ships. No registration, no heat. They simply were. Black hulls, curved and silent like knives lost in the void. Their approach was not fast, but deliberate, tactical. Every Earth sensor pinged alerts. Unknown fleet. No weapon locks, no IFF tags. Silas Renn stood in Earth Command's observation dome, alone as the ships took formation. He knew them. Not their design, not their registry, but their shape, their rhythm, their intent. "That's them," he said softly. Then a single transmission blinked onto the comm grid. No voice, just text in dual script, Aurelian and Terran Standard. "We come not as invaders. We come not to repay. We come to finish what he started." There was a pause. Then one final line. "Admiral Renn, you gave us a future. Now, we give you the fire." Earth Command froze. Even Marcus V hesitated. "You think they'll fight with us?" he asked. Silas turned away from the viewport. "They won't fight for us," he said. "They'll fight for what they owe." As Earth's defenses scrambled to reorient, the Aurelian fleet moved into high orbit, a crescent formation, their lead vessel aligning its spine with the heart of the oncoming enemy vector. They didn't broadcast demands. They didn't negotiate. They remembered, and in that memory, they prepared for war. They did not arrive like heroes. They did not march to trumpets, or wave banners, or send parades of warnings ahead of them. They simply appeared. And when the sky cracked open, when the Aurelian fleet took position over Earth, it wasn't with spectacle. It was with intention. Their ships were sleek and curved, made not for intimidation, but for efficiency. Designed in silence, forged in memory. Their hulls bore no flag, only symbols etched in reflective alloy, the mark of Renn. And a single crescent, the shape of the moon they had escaped under, all those years ago. The enemy came without hesitation. The coalition armada, a patchwork force of former allies turned opportunists, entered Sol space with full formation. Cruisers, siege ships, interceptor wings, tactically flawless. Their lead ship sent a single demand to Earth Command: surrender and disband. Humanity's reach ends now. The Council prepared a diplomatic reply. They never sent it, because before the message was even translated, the Aurelians moved. From the observation dome on Earth, Silas Renn stood beside Admiral Marcus V. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Below them, the Crescent Fleet broke formation. "They're going full burn," whispered a technician. No warnings, no targeting delay. "They're already inside the engagement zone." "But how?" another asked. "Those ships shouldn't be that fast." They weren't. They were precise. The first wave of Aurelian fire didn't come as missiles or lasers. It came as fold lances, weaponized gravity tethers that collapsed drive cores before enemy vessels could react. Coalition cruisers began to vanish, not in explosions, but in sudden implosions. 1 second, armed. Next second, gone, folded into space like tin into a black hole. The enemy broke into evasive scatter. Too late. Aurelian interceptors, small and near invisible to Terran sensors, sliced through the rear flanks. They didn't jam. They didn't warn. They just cut. Engine trails ruptured mid-boost. Escape pods were never launched. Weapons never fired. One by one, the coalition force began to unravel. Inside Earth Command, The silence was total. The feed from orbital defense platforms streamed what looked less like war and more like surgery. "This isn't retaliation," Marcus said slowly. "This is protocol." Silas nodded. "They didn't come for blood. They came to make sure no one ever tried this again." On the Aurelian flagship, High Commander Mara III stood before a cold, silver screen. No emotion. No orders barked. No panic. "Execute sector driftlock," she said. "No survivors beyond command vessels." The final Coalition destroyer turned too late. It collided with a torpedo net so precisely timed that it vaporized before its distress beacon could activate. Within 36 minutes, the engagement was over. 72 enemy ships neutralized. Aurelian losses, 0. And they never spoke a word. Not before, not after. Above Earth, the crescent formation resumed. No invasion, no declaration of dominance, just quiet orbit and the lingering echo of fire. In the aftermath, Earth's colonies fell into stunned silence. The Council, once fractured by fear and indecision, found itself shielded by the very race they had once nearly wiped out. And as reconstruction teams scrambled to reactivate planetary shields and coordinate new patrol routes, Silas Renn returned to his apartment. No cameras followed. No medals were pinned. No parades were held. He sat down at the small table in his kitchen, removed his boots, and stared at the blank wall ahead. The enemy was gone. The debt had been paid. And for the first time in decades, the stars were quiet. The orbital night was calm again. The enemy had been wiped away with surgical precision, but the fleet that remained in Earth's sky was no less intimidating. No broadcasts, no signals. Only their presence, like a blade unsheathed, but resting quietly on the table. In Earth Command, the Council finally found their courage. "We must open a channel," Chancellor Varen insisted. "We must thank them, formally." But Marcus V shook his head slowly. "You don't thank them," he said. "You listen." The channel opened not through diplomatic protocols, but through a private line, one buried in Earth's own system, keyed to a code long deactivated. A code belonging to Silas Renn. He was the only one authorized to receive it. He stood in the dark of his apartment as the screen flickered to life. The face that appeared wasn't human, but it wasn't alien anymore either. It was something between. Silver eyes, calm and intelligent, lined skin like pale stone under moonlight. No uniform, no decoration, just presence. "Silas Renn," the voice said, low and steady. "We remember." Silas didn't speak at first. His eyes were sharp but quiet. The Aurelian continued. "You spared us, not as a tactic, not as a delay, as recognition. The Federation called us a threat, but you saw a transport, not a target. You saw children, not statistics," Silas finally answered. "I broke protocol." The Aurelian's head dipped slightly. "You broke pattern. And for that, we built flame." Across the stars, the Aurelian race had never truly recovered their old power. They hadn't needed to. They had rebuilt something new. Not an empire, but a purpose. For 30 years, in the edges of mapped space, they studied war without anger. They built weapons not for expansion, but for precision. They watched humanity from afar, waiting for the day they might be needed. Not for revenge, but for balance. "We do not forget kindness," the Aurelian commander said. "Especially when it is hard. Especially when it costs. You saved a fragment of a broken race, and that fragment remembered. You asked for nothing." The voice paused. "But humanity asked. So we came. In Earth Command, the Council received a mirrored transmission. Only a single sentence appeared. A favor was owed. And then the fleet turned. No occupation, no ceremony, no demand. Just slow, silent movement, leaving Sol space as quickly as they had come. In the field behind Silas's building, a young cadet stood watching the sky. She had seen the war feeds, the precision, the power, the fear. Who were they? She asked. Not to anyone in particular. Silas, walking past, answered without slowing. Friends, he said, once. In the weeks that followed, Earth tried to write the story. The Council drafted statements. The media spun theories. Conspiracy nets screamed about mind control, genetic hybrids, hidden weapons. But the truth never made it to the headlines, because the truth was simple. A single act of mercy, buried, punished, forgotten, had echoed across time. And in return, it had answered with fire. It did not end with a parade. There were no banners, no global declarations, no holographic monuments beamed across the sky. But in the northern gardens of Earth Command, past the black glass memorial wall and the reflecting pool, they built a statue. It was modest, human in size, and made from the same metal alloy used in the hulls of the Aurelian fleet. The figure stood tall, back straight, one hand behind his back. No weapon, no rank, no salute. Just a man, standing quietly, watching the stars. At the base, a single inscription: he disobeyed, and in doing so, preserved us. They never officially declassified the Tyrell records. But in time, the story slipped through. First as whispers, then as legend, then as truth. Not the kind of truth that gets taught in military academies, but the kind that's carried in silence, between soldiers, between commanders, between those who've stood at the edge of the line and not stepped over. The Aurelian fleet never returned. They disappeared beyond the edge of known space. Their systems stayed quiet. Their codes remained unused. But across 3 galaxies, their silence meant something now. It meant, don't test what mercy remembers. Silas Renn never gave another order. He lived quietly in a coastal city where the rains came soft and the stars looked old. He kept no medals, no awards, no evidence of what he'd been part of. But sometimes, late at night, he walked to the ridge just outside town and looked up. The sky was calm, clear. No lights, no flares, no warships. And in that stillness, he heard one thing, not with his ears, but with something deeper. We remember. In the ruins of a collapsed coalition command vessel, floating silently in a radiation field on the edge of known space, a data core pulsed weakly. Inside it, a brief log, a broken transmission, a fragment of a name. Humanity is not to be measured by its weapons, the log said, but by the one who let us live when he had every reason not to. They asked nothing, but humanity remembered, and when they returned, they came not with hope, they came with fire.